Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and in this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the South Donetsk direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. According to information we have, the Russians managed to secure completely the fields and the fortifications of the armed forces of Ukraine between the villages of Novodonetsk, Prichistovka and Novomayorsk. So this territory was colored in Russian favor. We should have colored this territory as a contested area, but if you remember, yesterday we got the video of how the Russians were attacking this village of Prichistovka, and for example in this video we can see that the Russians were entering the village of Prichistovka not from the eastern side but from the western side, from the direction of these farms. So the Russians were entering like this way, so most likely due to this attack, due to this direction of attack, the territories below the village of Prichistovka were captured by the Russians before. So let's continue moving further, and according to information we have, the Russians by the morning of the 6th of September managed to secure completely the village by the name of Zolotaya Niva. So most likely today the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation will confirm this information, will provide us additional updates. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Pokrovsk direction, where there are very heavy clashes right now. So let's discuss them in details, and first we're going to talk about the report of the Commander-in-Chief Sieversk. He was interviewed by the CNN during the previous few days, and he reported that as a result of clashes for the previous 6 days, the Russians haven't managed to establish control over even a single square kilometer on the Pokrovsk direction. Of course, we can say that Sieversk is lying, because if we go back to map, we're going to find a lot of updates from different reliable sources about additional progress of the Russians. So let's discuss this in details. And according to information we have, there is a very huge fire anomalies all over the entire direction between the Pokrovsk city and the city of Hirnik. We have fire anomalies to the west, we have fire anomalies inside of Ukrainsk itself, we have fire anomalies in the Pokrovsk direction as well. So according to different mappers, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the village by the name of Lisovka. We have additional changes on map according to pro-Ukrainian mappers. So as you can see, Sieversk, the commander-in-chief, reported that the Russians haven't managed to establish control over even a single kilometer, but pro-Ukrainian mappers confirm completely different situation. Also, this information was confirmed by different neutral mappers. So summarizing everything, during the previous 24 hours, 48 hours, the Russians secured the village of Lisovka itself, and the Russians captured two important strongholds that located between the village of Dalinovka, Galicinovka, and Ukrainsk itself. Anyway, as you can see, the Russians managed, and this is the most important piece of news, the Russians managed to cut the defense between Ukrainsk and Girnik in two. So the Russians managed to dig between these two cities. Basically, the city of Ukrainsk is already cut from the mainland. The city is already semi-encircled by the Russians, and according to information we have, and according to different military experts, most likely during the next 24-48 hours, the Russians will attack and will attempt to establish complete control over the city. And this is very important city, very important position, because Ukrainsk has first of all high-rise building area which can be used by the Russians as a stronghold in the future, and the most important, the Ukrainsk has the landfill and the coal mine by the name of Ukraine. So this is the most important and strategical object for the armed forces of Ukraine, because in this stage of the Pokrovsk offensive operation, the Russians don't have goal and don't have target to take under control the entire Ukraine. As you can see, the Russians still haven't finished the battle for Novogrodovka. The Russians still haven't complete battle for Selidova. Furthermore, we have changes on the ground in Ukrainian favor. The Russians still haven't complete the encirclement of the Ukrainians in Sieversk, and because these are not the main goals of the Russians at this stage of the Pokrovsk offensive operation. Currently, the main target target and the main objective of the armed forces of Ukraine to establish complete control over the landfills and the Terrikons from the Pokrovsk to the south to Girnik. And according to information we have, the Russians have already established complete control over the landfills in the northern part of Novogrodovka. The Russians captured the landfill of Russia. The Russians captured, but without any confirmation, the landfill of Karachenka. And now the Russians are trying to take under control the landfill and the Terrikon of Ukraine. If the Russians are able to take under control all these strategical heights, then the Ukrainians will be forced to fall back. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but obviously under very heavy Russian artillery and FPV drone pressure, the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back almost without showing any resistance. So this is the main objective. The Russians don't want to waste their personal soldiers during these very, very difficult battles like in Selidova, between these buildings, between high-rise building areas, between the strongholds. This is not the main thing for now. Now they need to take the landfills, and they have already captured 80% of them since the beginning of the Pokrovsk offensive. So now let's move further and let's talk about Selidova itself. We continue receiving additional changes on the ground, and for example today different mappers have restored control over the central and the southern part of Selidova in Ukrainian favor. Everything as we've been discussing during the previous 24 hours, during the previous video, that most likely the Russians haven't entered the southern part, haven't entered this part, and most of those updates about the situation were just wishful thinkings and different speculations of probably pro-Russian sources. As for now, we know for sure that the Russians control just the western part of Mikhailovka, and we have another geolocation that can confirm this. In this video we can see how the Ukrainians were FPV droning the Russians exactly in this part of Mikhailovka, which confirms complete control over this territory. We haven't received anything from this area as well, so most likely we will color and we will adjust this territory back in Ukrainian favor because we haven't received anything that can confirm Russian progress in this direction. As for the landfill, this is very important, and as for different mappers, everything was restored back under complete Ukraine control, with just one exception, and we're talking about the landfill and the, let's say, this Terrikon of Karachenka. This is important, a very important update, very important piece of news, and we need to follow this situation because this is the main position of the armed forces of Ukraine, or the Ukrainians in this area. Who controls this landfill basically controls the Selidova itself, and it doesn't matter that the Russians have no progress during the previous 6 days. According to Sieversk, the most important, who controls right now the landfill. If the Russians, then it doesn't matter, and the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back in the very near future. Now let's move to the Pokrovsk direction. The Russians continue bombing and attacking the logistic and military and energy facilities and infrastructure all over the entire city. Today we got additional video with the picture of how the Russians were attacking the bridge, the main logistic bridge between the north and the south in Pokrovsk. So the Russians began reducing Ukraine logistic. Furthermore, according to information we have, currently there is no electricity in the entire Pokrovsk. The Russians have already destroyed the energy facilities, energy substations, so there is a complete blackout. So the siege, the Russians are preparing the siege, preparing the everything before the beginning of the full-scale offensive operation in direction of the city. But as I understand, the beginning of this operation is going to start somewhere in late or somewhere in mid-November, so during the period of time when the night is going to be as long as possible, when it's very suitable to assault, to conduct massive assault operations during the night period of time. Now let's talk about New York, and according to information we have, according to different mappers basically confirmed the information that we've been talking about for the previous 2 weeks or something like this. The Russians haven't managed to secure the citadel of New York itself, this industrial zone. The Ukrainians managed to save their presence there, and during the previous 2 weeks the Ukrainians were trying to unblock their forces in this citadel. And according to information we have, during the previous night, during the previous 48 hours, the Ukrainians managed to restore the roads between the citadel itself and the village of Nilipovka. The only question I have, whether it's something like temporary action, so the Ukrainians restore control with the citadel with the purpose to evacuate soldiers, or the Ukrainians are planning to counterattack the Russian positions and, let's say, to restore control over the New York itself. So for now it's very difficult to understand, but as I understand, I believe that Ukrainians managed to unblock their forces and now they will leave New York completely, and maybe in a week the entire territory will be colored in Russian favor, and then the Russians will be able to continue moving further in the northern direction towards the city of Terrikon. Now let's move further. We have confirmation that the Russians managed to restore completely the control over the fields between the Sieversk Donetsk-Donbass Canal and the village of Klishchevka, and now the Russians will try to handle with the situation with Ukraine positions between the villages Kurdyumovka, Zelenopolye, Andreevka and Klishchevka itself. So most likely this is the next target, and then the Russians will try to force the Ukrainians to fall back from the northern part. And we have additional changes on the ground in the village of Kalinovka. Different mappers confirmed additional progress of the armed forces of Russian Federation. Basically, the Russians managed to expand their foothold in this area, of course, which will allow the Russians to concentrate additional forces. And obviously, the bigger foothold they have on the Ukrainian side of Canal, the faster the entire progress will be. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Sieversk direction. During the previous 24 hours, we got additional updates and information of Russian missile strikes in the city of Slavyansk. And according to information we have, the Russians attacked and destroyed the temporary positions of the 63rd Mechanized Brigade, and as a result of attack, some concentration of forces, temporary positions were destroyed. And now let's talk about the Sieversk direction itself. We have additional videos from Verkhnyokamyanska. The Russians continue the artillery preparation and pummeling of Ukrainian positions in the eastern part of the village. So we expect that very soon the Russians will start the full-scale ground offensive operation, because they've been bombing this territory already almost every single day for the previous week. So it's time maybe to begin the ground and real offensive. So let's wait for additional updates. As for the northern Kupiansk direction, as you can see, this territory it's the biggest number of fire anomalies is coming exactly from this territory. We don't have any updates about, let's say, changes on the ground or additional progress of the armed forces of Russian Federation, but we see that this territory is under complete Russian control. I'm talking about artillery control, FPV drone control. Every single square kilometer was already bombed by the Russians, and the situation in the northern Kupiansk direction reminds me the situation that been taking place for the previous 3 months in the vicinity of Prichistovka. Significant number of Russian attacks, aviation strikes, FPV drone attacks, almost every single square kilometer, square centimeter in the Prichistovka direction before the beginning of Prichistovka offensive operation was bombed by the Russians. And now we can see the same story in the area in the northern Kupiansk direction. Let's take a look on this area once again and take a look at the fire anomalies. Almost the entire region is covered with fire. So obviously something big is going to happen very soon. Maybe not today, but obviously by the end of the September, the Russians will begin their first attempts to attack the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine with the purpose to defeat them completely. Just take a look once again on the number of icons that we are receiving from the northern Kupiansk direction. Once again, every single square millimeter was bombed by the Russians, was attacked by the Russian artillery, FPV drones, which confirms that the Ukrainians suffer significant losses in this direction, and the Russians obviously are preparing themselves before the beginning of the full-scale offensive operation with the purpose to get the city of Kupiansk itself and to capture everything in the northern part of the Kupiansk direction. Now let's go to the Kharkiv area. If you remember, yesterday we were talking about Ukraine attempt to attack by the Kharkiv Brigade, and today we were wondering and we had some doubts when exactly this attack took place, months ago, 3 days ago, or something like this. But today we got additional clarifications from different mappers, from different reliable resources that confirm that this is a very recent attack. And as you can see, based on this attack, we have adjusted the map in Ukrainian favor by adding additional territories under their complete control. So the Russians lost another stronghold in this area. They still control the village of Gluboko the Russians still control this big forest, and the Russians still control, you can see, but obviously the Ukrainians will make more attempts in the near future with the purpose to force the Russians to fall back. Now let's move to the Kursk direction. The Russians during the previous 24 hours destroyed another multiple launch rocket system M270 of the armored forces of Ukraine as a result of Iskander. So the another multiple launch rocket system Western production was added to the HIMARS cemetery in the Kursk direction. As for this area, we also have lots of fire anomalies, but the number of fire anomalies in the Kursk direction is much less in comparison with the Kupiansk. Anyway, there are very heavy clashes, and today we have some changes on the ground, and we have some interesting geolocations. According to information we have, the Russians managed to restore completely their positions and the territorial control over the territory in this small salient. If you remember, the Ukrainians had some salient in this area, some pocket that they were using for further offensive in the northern direction, but now, as you can see, the Russians managed to cut it, and we have some first geolocation from the village of Zhuravli. Probably will adjust the area in this direction as well. In this video we can see how the Ukrainians of the 225th battalion were FPV droning the Russian forces in this area, and this is obviously early autumn, so maybe yesterday, maybe the day before yesterday, and this Ukrainian FPV drone attack took place exactly in this area, and the Ukrainians were FPV droning the Russian supply machines. So most likely the entire territory between Kremennoye and Skrylovka was recaptured by the Russians, and we will adjust the map in Russian favor. So I think we have enough of evidence for this. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.